Sources that we thank you. So I'll go ahead and get started with my intro. My name is Gwendolyn Estrada, and I am the Director of Immigration Legal Services at Latinos Progresando. Latinos Progresando is an agency accredited by the Department of Justice. We focus on providing affordable, high quality immigration legal services to thousands of families every year. The goal of this training was to be able to share this information with this new exciting order that's in place, right? So that the frontline workers, you all that are on the ground servicing this community, is able to guide them and provide a little bit of information on what this entitles. Again, the training will be recorded, and then the presentation after the session will have it will be followed by a Q&A. And because of the size of the group, we ask everyone to please go ahead and drop your questions in the Q&A portion, and then there'll be a moment where those questions will be answered. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are grateful you're here today. And today's presenter is the respected attorney Giovanna Valdez. Giovanna Valdez is the founding partner of Valdez and Vilim LLP. She focuses her practice in the area of immigration and nationality law, including family-based immigration, humanitarian immigration such as asylum, VAWAs, U visas, T visas, and SIJS, naturalization, immigration appeals, and removal defense. She represents clients with cases before the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the Department of Justice. Everyone, please welcome Giovanna. And Giovanna, take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you take a little bit away from this presentation. As you guys know, right, there was a recent exciting announcement, um, but we don't have that much information about it. So I suppose the point of this is at least to get what we do know out, make sure the facts are out and not, I heard it was this, I heard it was that. Just make sure that you guys are clear on what it actually is so you can share that with your clients. And also so your clients don't fall victims to scams of people promising, things that aren't. Like Wendy said, any questions you guys think of throughout the presentation, just feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be tracking those so that we can try to answer all of them at the end. All right, well, we will get started then. If we want to go to the first slide on the agenda, what we will be answering today. I kind of divided it up into seven portions. So it's not so overwhelming. The first portion is going to be, what is Biden's new parole in place program? Like, what is this program, right? What's the big deal? Second is, why is this program important, right? How is this going to actually help people? Then we'll go through what we know of who qualifies. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions still. So we're all patiently waiting for the regulations to be published because the regulations on this program have not been published. So we don't know the full details. But at least we know the basics of who qualifies. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about also the basics about how to apply. Again, we don't have all the information that we need to apply yet. Recommended evidence, maybe folks can start gathering in preparation for this program once it starts in 18 days. And then the risks of applying, right? I think with everything, right? Anything that folks are applying for with immigration, there are some risks involved. And then the last portion is this fraud and scams thing that unfortunately it's becoming more and more prevalent with social media and things like that. I think people are falling more victim to this. So we'll talk a little bit about that to try to protect folks from that. All right, well, we'll get started with topic number one. I guess we can move to the next slide, which is, what is Biden's parole in place program? We can move to the next slide. Okay, all right, so what is parole in place? So we'll start with, what is parole? Parole is essentially a term that's used for folks that are not U.S. citizens, that says that they have entered the United States lawfully. So we've all heard of maybe, permanent residents, or people that come on B2 visas, or, H-2B visas. There's all these visas people come on, but then there's also something called parole. That's not necessarily a visa, but it is still a lawful entry. And so parole, that's what it means. You've been inspected by an immigration officer and you've been allowed to enter the United States. Now, generally, parole is granted at the border, at some border, right? Or at an airport. right? A port of entry, or I guess it could be also, I guess people also travel through water, right? But any port of entry or border is generally where a parole is granted. Now, parole in place, if you kind of think, okay, parole in place, it basically means it's they're giving you parole without having to travel to a border or a port of entry or leave the country. So it's a great benefit, right? They're essentially giving you a lawful entry from within the United States. You're never having to leave, but you're going to get that benefit of a lawful entry. And so we'll talk a little bit in the next, I think, slide about what that actually means, why a lawful entry is important. So we can move to the next slide. So why is parole in place important? So parole in place, like I said, equals a lawful entry into the United States. And a lawful entry into the United States is like, I always say it's like the golden ticket, it's like the ticket into the party, because it allows you to request your residency within the United States if you have what we call an immediate relative to petition for you. So if you have a US citizen spouse, or you have a US citizen son or daughter, meaning over 21, or you are a minor and you have a US citizen parent, then you are able to request your residency in the United States if you have a lawful entry, right? So think about that, right? Generally, when people come in without documents, they generally have to do a process, leave the country, do a waiver, this whole long thing. But if you have a parole in place, it says that you entered lawfully. And if you have that relationship of someone that could petition for you, of those people that I just mentioned, that means you don't ever have to leave the country and you can get your residence here. Now, again, that's important because they don't have to leave the country. That's also important because they don't have to go through this long process of that's called consular processing, which is so consular processing generally right now, it depends on what country you're from, but it could range from like, I don't know, 4.5 years to, 5.5, 6 years. So obviously, if you're able to get your green card here, it is much quicker. So this parole in place is really, 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 really a big benefit for folks. Okay, so this is what is parole in place. We already went through this one. We can go to the next. Why is it important? Went through that. Went through that. Okay, who qualifies for parole in place? So here, let's talk a little bit about the requirements, right? So these are the very basic requirements that have been shared with us. And I think, all of you guys have heard on the news or if you've seen it online or you looked it up yourself, did your own little research, right? And this is kind of the information that we know. We know that you have to show that you've been in the United States for at least 10 years or more. So since June 17th, 2014 to present day. Right now, I think, again, continuously. Some people might be like, well, what if I left for a year? What if I was gone? We don't know if there's exceptions. We don't know, continuously to me generally means you couldn't have been outside the country for more than 90 days. Generally, that's like the immigration world. But I don't know. We have to wait for the regulations, see how they define continuously. But essentially, have been in the US for the last 10 years. Next, you have to have been physically present. Now, this part that I'm saying right now, it wasn't in, I think, the announcement, but I think back to DACA and they're going to want folks to probably prove that they were here, right, the day that he announced it. So I think that's important. I'm telling folks to try to find evidence of that day, right? Just to be prepared in case once the regs come out, just like DACA, you have to show you were here that day that he announced it. So proof that you were here June 17, 2024. Client is legally married to a US citizen the day that the program was announced. So getting married now isn't probably helpful because you have to have been married at that day that they announced it. Then people might be like, well, what if I was married, but now I'm divorced? Do I qualify? Again, we have to wait for the regs to come out, right, for those clarifications. Client entered into the United States without admission or parole and does not currently hold any lawful immigration status. So, this, when we think of sometimes folks maybe entered with a B2 visa or some sort of visa, and you're like, well, why would they even need this? They already have a lawful entry. What if they lost their visa? What if they lost their passport? And so they don't have proof of their lawful entry. And so this would have been a great thing. But unfortunately, if they entered with a visa, if they entered lawfully, they will not be eligible for this program. Um, and then client does not have a serious criminal record. What does that mean? Again, we have to wait for the regulations, right, to see exactly what they define as serious criminal record. I'm going to assume it's something to do, they're probably going to say similar to like the DACA program, right? You can't have more than two misdemeanors or certain things I'm sure are going to be on the list of things that disqualify you, right? Is it DUI to disqualify you? 2 DUIs, 3 DUIs? I don't know. But it does say, right, that you can't have a serious. So those are the basic preliminary requirements that we know of. So this is something that if you have, come in contact with clients, these would be things that maybe you would want to know before, when maybe referring them out to talk to somebody about this program. All right, we can go to the next slide. How to apply. Let me tell you, this slide is going to be very basic because we don't have much information. So we can move to the next slide where we'll go briefly through, the basics, which is, I just put here a big disclaimer, right? It's still uncertain. We don't have the regulations out. The start date, we do have that. So that has been announced, and that is August 19th, 2024. So in 18 days, USCIS has stated that they will begin to um, receive, or I guess accept, I should say, these applications. Now, what application, what form is it? We do know there will be a form. We don't know exactly what form that is. Now, I can tell you right now, there is a form for parole that we generally use. It's the I-131. However, we don't know if, in fact, that is the same form that's going to be used because it is a very basic form. Like it doesn't even ask you about arrest. It doesn't even ask you, I think, about your last entry. Like it asks the most basic of information. So I assume that they're going to make a little more of a hefty form for this, but I suppose if it is the I-131, great, right? That would be great for all of us because it's less work and they are not asking, getting into our business about things that maybe, just don't want to disclose. So the form is, like I said, we don't know what the form is yet. That will hopefully come out when the regulations come out. Fee, there's been rumors that the fee is going to be the same as advanced parole, but those are only rumors. The government has said nothing. But if it, let's say it is, right, that would make sense because it is that form, the I-131. It would be $630. Will there be a fee waiver where people can, show that they can't pay it? I don't know. Again, because there are no regulations out on this yet. But I assume there will be a fee for that. Filing address, where do you file? Who could say? I don't know because we don't have a filing form yet. We don't have a form. So that is, again, something that will probably come out when the regulations come out, right? And we can go over to the next slide. Okay, so recommended evidence. This is, I'm just sharing essentially the list that we have created as an office to try to get clients to prepare for this program. And essentially, it's evidence to support the qualifications, right? So proof of, your marriage to a U.S. citizen. That's going to mean a marriage certificate. If if you guys have been married before, you obviously have to show the divorce decrees to show that your marriage is valid. Copy of photo IDs of both your spouses, of both spouses, I should say. Copies of birth certificates, right, of the applicant and of your U.S. citizen spouse. If they were born here, if they weren't, it's probably going to be a naturalization certificate. Now we can move to the next slide. I think I have probably the physical presence evidence on the next. Oh, nope. Okay. Probably didn't make it. So the physical presence evidence, the physical presence evidence is evidence just showing that you were here, right? You were here from 2014 until now. So that could be bills, taxes, anything like that, that just shows your name, date, and address in the United States, or it's a document that's provided by some agency or some organization that's obviously in the United States. Okay, risks of applying. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why there's this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. This has nothing to do with what we're doing. So sorry. So just focus on this part, risks of applying. So risks of applying, I think with anything, right? So anytime you fill out any sort of application with immigration, right, you're putting your name, you're putting your address. Sometimes you're even putting your employer information, your family information. So just obviously be aware, right? Folks need to be aware that when you're applying for this, you're giving them your information, that you are here. And so, I think that it could be said that if, let's say, the government at some point is looking for you, they could use that information to find you. I think there's also folks that believe, right, you're giving your information to immigration, so you risk that they can turn on you, right? If the program ends, they can go after you. Personally, in my career, I have never seen that. I have seen it for folks that have warrants out for their arrest and apply for a benefit and they go get them. But I have never seen for folks that don't have anything like that. And let's say they apply for something and it's denied or the program stops. I've never seen them go after them. But if, let's say, they have an arrest warrant, like a criminal arrest warrant or an immigration arrest warrant, an immigration arrest warrant would obviously be if you have some sort of like order of removal or something like that. Or if you have a lengthy criminal record, right? I think that's also something to be wary of. If you have a criminal record of some sort of dangerous crime, then absolutely it is a risk, right? To apply. Maybe you shouldn't even be applying. Like maybe you don't even qualify. But just know, obviously, if you're applying for an immigration benefit, you're giving them your information. So that's a warning you should give folks. Another thing is, I think the biggest risk here that my mind, and this is again just my personal opinion, is money and hopes. Because there is a very big possibility, like I said, that I say in the slide, it is very possible this program does not continue, or it does not continue for a long time. It does not continue for very long. So, it is possible that it starts August 19th, but there will probably be a lawsuit quickly after, and a lawsuit that is probably brought by, right, the Republican Party or folks, conservative folks that are not in agreement with it and will try to argue that the government is abusing its power in providing such a program. And I think that what we all fear is that when this lawsuit is brought, that they're going to obviously request what's something called an injunction. An injunction means that they ask for the program to be frozen, to be stopped, where it's at while the lawsuit is complete or finalized. That is what we have seen happen with like the extended DACA that was announced. It just hasn't moved, right? Since the moment that the injunction started, it just has not restarted. So that is, I think, our fear that we will maybe we can file a lot of these, but it is very possible that they won't be processed. And if that's the case, because there's an injunction, folks are out, I suppose, money and hopes, right, that there would have been a way to get their green card. So that's the risk with that. Obviously, well, USCIS, if they stop the program, right, and the person has already filed and paid the fee, they obviously will not return people's money. Right? They'll just hold on to it while they hold the cases in abeyance. That's the risk. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so how to detect fraud and scams. And this slide is kind of just based off of experiences, right, that we've seen, our, clients that have reported to us. And I know Wendy will have something to add here of folks that have kind of come to us and just asked, hey, is this normal? Hey, this is what happened. And then we figure out, this is totally a scam. Don't do what they're asking. Or, oh, it's X, you've already paid the money. And that was actually not true. It was in fact a scam. So we'll go through, we can go to the next slide where we just have a couple of pointers. So folks sometimes are just so desperate, right? They're so desperate to hear what they want and what's convenient. And I don't not what's convenient, but what just something that sounds good, right? And promising. And I think that often there's people out there, right, painting a picture that it's so beautiful and it will all work out and I'll get you that really quickly. And but they don't ever describe the risks, right? They don't just ever describe the cons of the process. And they're more of in a rush, right, to get their money in. Are you starting now? Are you starting now? I'm not going to name names, but there are even attorneys out there, right? Some organizations, some law firms that call people constantly after a consult, and I just think that's very crazy. Almost pressuring folks, right, to start a case without really explaining things to them. So I think that's always a red flag, right? If someone's trying to pressure you to give them money right away without really explaining the process and also without a contract. I think that always makes me so crazy when I talk to folks that they're like, oh yeah, I gave this attorney or this person money and then they just like disappeared. And I'm like, do you have a receipt? Do you have a contract of like what the services were going to be? Would it include it? No, no. Um, so I think that, right, also educating our clients and making sure if you're getting a service, there should be a contract, there should be a retainer, there should be a receipt of what the services include. Um, claims to have an immigrant claims to have in with immigration judges or immigration officers or anything like that, right? Oh yeah, I know them well. Oh yeah, I've got connections, things like that, right? Um, it's just not true. It's just not true. It's not possible. I mean, sure, there are some of us that have friends that are on the bench or friends that work at USCIS or but we're not going to be. You can't. No, you can't use that, right? That's not going to help you in any way. So I think that when people are claiming to have an in with these agencies, I think that's also a big red flag. And I think Wendy, you can speak more to this. I've heard of it, but I think you guys have had the recent experience with this, like these WhatsApp, right? With these, you can give the examples of kind of what you guys have seen.
Thank you. Thank you, Giovanna. Yeah, I'll be brief on two quick examples. So one is someone reached out to us that on a Facebook Live, there was an immigration attorney kind of saying, with this new law, or reach out to us to see if you're eligible for a work permit. This person sent a message through a WhatsApp number. He got a call a couple of days after with an immigration attorney, supposedly, and then this person said, asked him like two questions and said, go ahead and send me your matricula and your passport, right? And then we will tell you if you're eligible for a work permit. 3 days after that, he got a call saying, my team and I decided to take on your case. You are eligible for a work permit. Do a wire transfer of 750 to be able to get your process started. And then by Monday, you're going to have a meeting with a judge and you'll be able to, then you do qualify for a work permit. The reason why we wanted to bring up something and invite Giovanna to talk to all of you is because you what happened with this client is he went to a bank to deposit the money to be able to get his process started. When someone at the bank informed him this doesn't seem right, it just so happened that this person is a client of ours and gave our information. This person contacted us, and at the reception area, something sounded it was wrong. So I talked to him. I went ahead and completed a consultation. He's not eligible for any process. But had he not, if the person at the bank would not have said, hey, this does not look good, he would have lost that money. And this is why this is so important. The other one that you should all be aware is a U Visa client of ours. He has a case already started with us through a WhatsApp. Got in a hold of this attorneys, and it usually comes from the Facebook Live, TikTok lives, and he went ahead and started getting phone calls from he Googled the number and it turned out to be the Washington Police Department. So they had cloned. So the caller ID show this information. He actually did sell the money and lost it. But because they were saying that they were reaching out, that they had all of his information, and he thought in his head, I already have a case started. If I don't pay this, they are gonna cancel. They said, if you don't pay this amount, we're gonna come after you because we have all your information. So it's very I guess it's just important for all of us. It's as sad as it sounds. If it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not true, right? And we'll share all the resources after and who you can refer them to. And thank you, Giovanna, again. I don't know if I missed anything else here, but thank you.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I've met with clients that, to your point, that have actually been on a video call with a judge, and they're like, it was an interview, they asked me the questions, and then they told me I would receive my green card in 2 weeks. A video? Like, I obviously did the consult, they're not eligible for adjustment. And there is no such thing as video interviews with an immigration officer. That's not a thing. Um, this one, yeah, you can't do also interviews via video with what they call consuls at the embassy. So I've also heard that where they're like, oh yeah, I had an interview with somebody at the embassy via video. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. So things like that doesn't exist. So when you hear clients are expressing that they've paid money and they have an interview via video or something like that, ooh, that sounds a little fishy. That's a little bizarre. There absolutely are hearings via video, hearings with immigration judges. That is a thing. Obviously, clients just sometimes don't know the difference, right? But um, just watching out, I think, for those things, and trying to send them to a reputable organization, right, to consult, to make sure that what they're doing is actually real before they spend more money. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we could go to the next slide, which I think is a couple of resources where folks could look up their clients' attorneys if in fact they're like, oh yes, it was an attorney, right? There's the ARDC website, and so the ARDC is only for Illinois barred attorneys. It's not going to include other states. So obviously, for other states, you can Google, right? Kentucky bar, right? Kentucky bar might take you to other things, but Kentucky bar, or attorney licensing agency or something like that. But every state obviously has their own website where you can look up a lawyer and see if they're actually licensed. There's also the same thing for DOJ accredited reps. For organizations, if someone's telling you they're accredited or they're saying they're accredited, you can always on this website also that's included in here. You can also see if immigration attorneys have been disbarred or have been suspended. When you look up their information, there's surprisingly a lot. Yeah, so that's the resources. The next slide I think is the Q&A, if I'm not mistaken. It is. Yeah. So yeah, I think we can move into questions if folks have questions. I think we only have one that came in.
Yes, so it's should people begin the I-130 form online and be ready for submission on the August date? Is the I-130 the form used to apply for parole in place?
The I-130 or the I-131?
I-130.
No, 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 no. So an I-130 is a relative petition. An I-130 is a petition that you file for your family member if you want to start a process generally for residency, right? So the I-130 is absolutely not the correct form. The form that I was mentioning earlier was an I-131. An I-131 is a form that's used for parole, for advanced parole, for military parole, for reentry permit, for travel document. It's a form that's used for all sorts of things. But we don't know if this is the form that's going to be used for this. And we don't know if you can even file it online. So I would absolutely not recommend that you start any sort of form online because we don't know what form they're using.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Giovanna. We have another one. The preliminary requirements mention enter without inspection. What about someone who enter with a document from another person, such as a border crossing card?
Ooh, it's a sticky situation. I would absolutely recommend that person go see someone who is accredited or go see an attorney to answer that question. And then hopefully also when the regulations come out, we will know if like what does a person that entered without inspection, what is the definition of that, right? Does it include folks that potentially use documents of another person? But that's a sticky one because you got the issue of fraud, right? When you're admitting such a thing, which is a whole other immigration issue.
Thank you. Is there a speculation of the date the Form I-131 will be available?
Well, we don't. So I'm going to be clear again. Form I-131 is the form we use currently for something that's called advanced parole, parole in place for military families, reentry. That form is the one that we use for other things. That is not necessarily the form you're going to use for this program. So there is an I-131 available now for other types of relief. But I don't know if the I-131 will be used for this program. I hope that's clear.
Thank you. This person is have written letters for clients that apply for DACA. Would it be likely that some clients will also need letters to show when they got here?
Um, I think that so letters, notarized letters are generally we call secondary evidence. And if I suppose the person can't come up with primary evidence is generally documents that can't be as easily falsified, right? They come from some sort of agency. So if the person can't come up with primary evidence, then maybe, yeah, those letters will be necessary. But ideally, you want to come up with primary evidence first.
When will the new form be potentially available then?
I'm dying to know personally. I don't know. That's why I think that it's a little bit frustrating, right? That we're all preparing for this thing that's so unknown. We don't know when the form will be available. I'm hoping before the 19th of August, since that is the day they're accepting them. And the 19th falls on a Monday. So I'm hoping that even before that Friday, right? Because otherwise it'd be a crazy weekend for us. But um, yeah, I don't have an exact date. That information has not been released.
There's one more question about referrals that Legal Aid in Chicago that the team could receive. Again, we will go ahead and after the presentation, we'll go ahead and email you all a referral, the resources that we have. Where should we be checking for the form or updates or updates?
I mean, I think the USCIS website does have like a page about the new program. Um, it's the Parole in Place program. I can probably, yeah, I can drop the link into. Um, so here is I can give you a link here. Here's like the announcement. Um, and I'm hoping that on their website, right, they will have a big announcement about this. Hopefully on their main page, right? That would be great. But yes, I mean, we are checking it every day and hoping that it comes out anytime.
Will a FOIA need to be completed for anyone applying?
I think that that is a case by case decision. Um, so FOIAs, right? Freedom of Information Act, that's what FOIA stands for. And we generally will do FOIAs. I mean, I personally do not do FOIA for every single client because I don't see there is generally not a need for that. For FOIA, you're asking for whatever evidence the government or whatever agency you're doing the FOIA with has on your client. But if your client has never applied for anything, never been caught at the border, like you're not going to get anything. So if you're doing a FOIA, you obviously you should have a purpose of why you're doing it and what you're looking for. And so I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If that affects their eligibility, then maybe you do have to do a FOIA and wait for the results. But if it doesn't affect their eligibility, I don't see why you would even do a FOIA.
Thank you. Will same-sex partners who are married have any issue with applying for this?
I don't see why. You shouldn't.
Thank you. Any
I
more
see one
questions? Mhm.
here that says, will someone who has lived in the US illegally for more than 10 years qualify? Yes. Yes. So it's 10 years or more, right? So a person who got here like 89, 93, right? Absolutely. I think it's the questions of, we have folks sometimes who were here and then they left and then they came back and then, right? So that's where we don't really know, um if their travel was within the last 10 years, like will they qualify? Unknown until the regulations come out. And then here's someone says, do you mean a criminal record check by FOIA? Maybe they did. Maybe that's what they meant. So if the question is, should we be doing criminal record checks for everyone or for folks before they apply? I think if your clients do have a criminal background and they don't really have a good memory of it and they can't go get the court dispositions, then yeah, that's maybe a good idea. Actually, that reminds me one thing that wasn't on when we talked about evidence, right? I think court dispositions, right? So if you got clients who have arrests, who have convictions, you absolutely want to also have them start getting those court dispositions in the counties where they were arrested.
Giovanna, I see one more on should they file I-130 now?
All right, so maybe that's a connection there. Um, I'm leaving it up to folks to choose their pathway. I obviously explain the program. I explain what they're eligible for now. So most of them counselor processing, right? And up to this point, my clients have opened clients that are eligible for counselor process, they're continuing to open those cases because I think we're all scared that this Biden thing won't fully mature, right? As we wish. So they don't want to waste time. And so a lot of my clients are still continuing with their I-130. That's just again, personally my clients, but I think every family, right, will decide what's best for them. Their financial situation might obviously affect that decision as well. But yeah, they absolutely could. There's no harm in it.
You believe they can go ahead and file them together, I-130 and the parole in place?
So they can absolutely file them together at the same time in different envelopes or online, the I-130 and that, right? But they can't be like one unit packet, right? Because they're probably going to different places, right? That we have to look at their filing addresses and things like that. So it's not like a package you can generally send together. But if you're asking if you can file them at the same like date and time and put them in separate filing envelopes or whatever, absolutely. I'm definitely doing that for clients. I have clients who are doing their I-130, started their I-130, but they're also like, when Biden program starts, I am doing that immediately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Oh, here, someone asked, do they receive an I-94 number when they enter the country? Okay. And then someone said, here's the parole entry and just explaining. Um, so if someone is granted parole, they are given an I-94 number. I don't know if that answers the question. They are when they are granted parole. And I think I'm just going to give one last little piece of hopeful note here. Um, there is this type of program already exists. Like I've mentioned, parole is a thing, it's existed for many years. Parole in place is also already a thing. We already give parole in place to folks There's military parole in place for folks that have military family members. If they have a son or daughter, spouse, or a parent, and they're a minor, they can get a parole in place. The same exact thing that we are talking about today. So, with that being said, that already exists. So this whole lawsuit thing, right? We're going to sue the government because they don't have the power. We have had military parole in place, I think, since 2015, maybe even earlier, 2014. We've had this for years. So the fact that if they now want to sue, I don't know how successful that's going to go. But the other thing then that scares me, if they are successful, then are they going to also take away military parole, right? I'd like to think not, because I don't think Trump tried to take that away under his administration very early on, and he learned a very hard lesson, and he started it right up again because it did not go well. So to me, that's hopeful. The fact that we already have this and we've had it for so many years, that it gives me hope that in fact a challenge won't work. But we shall see. We shall see soon enough, right?
I have one more question, Giovanna. In the
Mhm.
I-130, they should specify place to adjust in Chicago if they are willing to apply for parole in place.
Well, the I-131 doesn't ask you that.
No, in the I-130, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. In the I-130, you know what? My little piece of advice would actually be to put counselor, that there will be counselor processing. The reason I say that is because when you do that and you end up adjusting, all that happens is that USCIS says, hey, National Visa Center, give me that file back. This person is now adjusted. But if you do it backwards, if you put adjusting and then they keep it at USCIS, but then guess what? The program doesn't move forward. And now you have to do counselor processing. You have to pay USCIS to send that to the NVC. You have to pay a filing fee, file a form, and it takes about 1.5 years. So save that money, save that time. I would just suggest put that they're counselor processing and they end up adjusting. That's okay. The file will be sent for free where it needs to go for the adjustment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right? Nothing else?
No,
Perfect. Perfect. Well, hopefully when we get more information, maybe we can do a little more, more formal one with more details. But as of now, everyone just, I guess, keep your eyes peeled, ears open to any news.
thank you so much, Giovanna, for your time and for sharing all this great information. And thank you, everyone who joined us. We'll send a follow-up email. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.